Welcome back to Inspired Forward, everyone. I'm Dan Trinidad, and today I'm excited with my guest, Greg Dickerson. Greg is a serial entrepreneur. He's a real estate investor and developer. He served in the United States Navy right out of high school prior to his entrepreneurial journey. During his career, he's bought, developed, and sold over $200 million in real estate, and built hundreds of custom homes and commercial buildings, developed multiple residential and mixed-use subdivisions, and started 12 different companies from the ground up. I am excited to have you on. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me here. And I love the last name, Trinidad, man. That's just awesome. That's a great name.
Thank you. Thank you. So, first off, I want to thank you for your service. I know right out of high school you joined the Navy, and
yeah, came from a military family. My dad was 20 years and went in. He's right out of high school and enlisted, came out an officer, and then I went in right out of high school. But I only did I did my 4 years and got out. I'm a natural born entrepreneur, and that's what I've always wanted to do. So I served my country, got out, and then I've been kind of on my own journey ever since. And I want to kind of show this. This is in the background, my wife's favorite picture. So a lot of people are like, what is that over your shoulder? So it's the Dalmatians playing poker. Or Dalmatians sitting around, not playing poker. There's another one that's Dalmatians playing poker, but that's her favorite picture. So it makes
that
kind
is
of
a cool. Do you guys have Dalmatians?
No, it's just one of those things. It's just a picture, and there's a famous one, like I said, of the Dalmatians playing poker. They have the hats on and all that, but yeah, it makes a neat background. I popped home for lunch and said, you know what? Usually I'm on the road when I do these. I just pull the car over and bust out the laptop and knock it out. But today I just happened to be at home, so.
Well, I like it. So you were in high school. Were you an entrepreneur in high school and growing up as a young man, or did that come to you, after you joined the Navy?
No. So I started at a young age. I mean, I was in California, elementary school, preschool, elementary school years. We left when I was in fourth grade. So I was cutting grass. I don't know how old you are in fourth grade. What are you, 8, 9 years old? So I was cutting grass at 9, 10 years old for people to make money in California. I mean, literally going, knocking on doors. Hey, I live up the street. I'm Greg Dickerson. I need to make some money. I'll cut your grass, and here's this little kid, right? So what are you going to do? Say no? And if your grass was long, I'm knocking on your door. And it was hot. It's California. I was in San Diego. So people were glad to have me do it. And I would use their lawnmower, their equipment. Then we moved to Pensacola, Florida. I did 5th grade through 11th grade there. And in Pensacola, there were a lot of big pine trees. So in the summer, I was cutting grass, and I had my own lawnmower at that point, my dad's lawnmower. So I would take that and I would push that with my gas can around and just knock on doors and cut grass. And in the winter, fall and winter, I'd rake pine needles because they would fall all year round down there. So pine needles were a big problem. In my area now, people buy pine needles to put into their flower beds. When I was a kid, that was punishment. Go rake the pine needles and put them in the flower bed. It's funny what people will pay for, right, in different areas.
I didn't know that. I've got a ton of pine needles up at my Tahoe house, and every year I got to talk anybody into trying to get those things cleaned up.
Yeah, so so I mean, I had the big rake that was like 4 or 5 feet long, and you drag it behind you and rake up the pine needles. It's not hard work, but it's time consuming. So anyways, I was just wired that way. So I'd knock on your door and I'd say, hey, I need to make some money. I'll wash your car, cut your grass, babysit your kids, whatever you need done, I'll do it. I didn't clean houses, but anything other than that, I'm not going to vacuum your house, but I would do anything else. And so that's just kind of how I was wired. And my dad instilled in me business principles at a young age. So he would charge me for the gas that I used, to power the lawnmower, and he would charge me for using his lawnmower. So he took a percentage of everything I made. When I was real young, if I ever needed money, he kept a log. He would write down every nickel he gave me, and he kept a log of it. So every year at Christmas, he would show me how much money I owed him. And he would say, here's your Christmas present or birthday. Instead of getting me something, he would right? So
sounds like he was the great entrepreneur.
Oh, it's funny. So that's how I grew up. And then I got paid for chores around the house, different things that I did. But, the interesting thing was so I was in martial arts as a kid, and that's not, an inexpensive sport, but it's not super expensive. But, you had to buy your gi, you had to buy your belts. And for every testing for the next belt, I don't know, back then it was like $20, $25. To test to get to the next belt level. So he told me, hey, you want to do this, go make money and you pay for your testing. So I literally would go knock on doors, to my neighbors and say, hey, I need to make some money. I'm in karate and I'm testing for the next level and it's $25. What can I do for you to make 25 bucks? And they'd say, well, cut my grass for 4 times this month and I'll pay you 25 bucks. So, I mean, I worked out creative financing at a young age to pay for my testing to get a black belt.
Wow, very cool. Did you have the whole investment goal at that point in time, or did you just make money because you needed it because there were things you wanted to do or you wanted to buy?
So it was a consumption mindset. So that's what I was learning, is that if you need money to spend, you got to go make it. So before I could get a job, that's how I earned money, was doing odd jobs and whatever I could do. And then when I was able to work, when I was old enough to work, I immediately would went out and got a job. One of the first jobs I ever had was telephone sales. So, I mean, I was a telephone salesman, and I had one job where I was door to door. And so I did those things. And then, one of the things I did, I loved to bowl. My parents were bowlers. And when I was a kid, I mean, I don't know, I was 13, 14 years old and I had a 180 average. I was a good bowler. My parents bowled in the league. So I was hanging out in the bowling alley and I would bust tables in exchange for free games. So, I've always kind of I always used it as a means to an end. It was never an investment mindset. I was never taught. My dad didn't know anything about investing. They were savers. So my dad was military. My mom worked for Blue Cross and Blue Shield her whole life. So they were never investors. They had their retirement plans. So that was done for them, but they never invested themselves until they got older. When I became older and started my business, which we're going to talk about later, and I started investing in real estate and doing things, then they ended up buying a beach house where I lived. And that was like the only investment they made in real estate outside of their personal homes. That was really the only investment they ever made was in houses. And they did make money on their houses. So going back to when we left Pensacola, Florida, that was probably 1983. And the market wasn't great. The interest rates were really high back then. And they did a creative finance deal when they sold that house. They had to finance the buyers on a second mortgage. And I remember them talking about that. And we moved back to Virginia Beach and they bought a house there. And so they traded houses along the way throughout my dad's career and made money and rolled it into the next house. Mm-hmm. So their mindset was what a lot of people were taught. And in the mortgage business, it used to be, you've been in it, 30 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you guys used to say 30 years ago? Buy as much house as you can.
Right.
Take every nickel you make and buy the biggest house you could buy, right?
Right.
Because 30 years ago that worked, because it appreciated so much. Nowadays, that's not so much the case. It's going the other way. You should buy as little house as you need, get by with absolutely the minimum that you need. But back 30 years ago, that was the mindset. Buy as much house as you can, max out your income, take it as far as you can take it. And then when I bought my first house, I bought on a 3-2-1 buy down, if you remember those.
Yeah, I do.
It was a new construction house, and it was the way a 3-2-1 buy down works is you have a low interest rate the first year, then it goes up the second year, and it goes up the third year so that you can afford to get into a house that you can't afford. And the plan is you're going to make more money and be able to afford it. So it was 7 3/4, 8 3/4, and 9 3/4. That was a good interest rate back in 1992 when I bought my first house. It was, 1991, 92 time,
yeah.
90. It was 1990, and I sold it in 95.
I remember when we went into single digits, when we went from 10 to 9 7/8.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, we thought we died and went to heaven.
Yeah, so it's an interesting time and an interesting business. And even in 2009, before the market tanked, my construction interest that I was paying, for the properties that I was building, I was paying 9 3/4 construction interest on multi-million-dollar properties, and that was good. That was a good interest rate. So it's interesting where we're at now.
So you went into the Navy, and where was it that you decided I'm going to become an investor in real estate? So, if your dad wasn't, or your parents weren't investors in real estate, who influenced you, and where'd you learn, and how'd you get started?
So, so I have 2 backgrounds, restaurants and construction. And I was working in a restaurant, and this guy was building an addition, and he hired me to come clean up after him. And I'm a hard worker, so he liked me. So I started following him around and learning construction, cleaning up, and then did the next thing and the next thing. So fast forward, I moved to the Outer Banks in 1997. I'd gotten out of the military. I was in the construction and restaurants. I had my own little construction company, and I'd work restaurants in the evening. And in 1997, we decided to move to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is a resort island off the coast of North Carolina, summer beach vacation destination. It's where the Wright brothers took off and first flight, happened. So I moved there and I started a little remodeling company. I was going to open a restaurant and I ended up doing construction instead. It was a very busy time and there was, nobody could get anything done. Nobody could find anybody to do any work for them, like little stuff. So I had some skills and it was just me, my truck and my tools. And I started out remodeling houses and doing handyman work. And my first year we did 250,000 in sales. 7 years later, I was one of the largest builder developers doing 30 million a year. And I started 12 companies along the way at the same time and, quit smoking and lost weight at the same time and all of that. Right. So, by what happened was I was doing work for some investors that were buying beach houses, adding value to them like a pool, hot tub, elevator, and then increasing the rent and then selling them. Just kind of like you do with apartments or anything else, but they were doing these with single family homes because these things rented for a lot of money. I mean, the bigger beach houses would rent for $200,000-$300,000 a year, big oceanfront houses. So they were like commercial properties. And then I had a friend who was a real estate developer, and he taught me how to build spec houses by doing it with him. So I was the builder. I found the land, did the building, and did all that. He was supposed to be the money. And what happened was I got completely taken advantage of. He really cheated me big time, but I learned, really valuable lessons from that whole process. And, he was supposed to be the money. I was just supposed to be the builder. Turned out that, that I ended up being the builder and the money and signing on the loans. I mean, all these different things. He took total advantage of me, and we were supposed to sell the houses, split the profits. He decided he wanted to keep them. So he was going to buy me out. We were both on the notes for these houses. He went and refinanced them, pulled the equity out, and didn't even tell me.
Whoa.
And, yeah. And I didn't even know how you could do that. Right. I didn't even know how you could do that. But back then he did. And, so it was really interesting, that whole process. But I learned a ton in that process. I ended up making some money, but, I got cheated out of a couple $100,000 on about 5 houses that we built together. And the sad story was that at the time, he was the husband of my wife's best friend. They were, maid of honor at each other's weddings, and it just totally destroyed that relationship because he was just a cheat and not a very moral individual at all.
Now, did this occur when you were just getting started?
Yeah, that was my first experience building spec houses. So right out of the gate, I learned the hard way and totally got taken advantage of.
Wow.
And I was a builder, general contractor. I'd built my business. I'd already been there, 4 or 5 years. And I started getting into, bigger projects, building spec houses. And he came along and said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to be a developer. And this is what we're going to do. So anyways, that was early on in my career. And it taught me a lot, learned a lot of great lessons. So I took all of that and just learned and moved forward and it just kept going from there. So I was in an area where a lot of very sophisticated developers were coming down from Northern Virginia, the DC area, in the northern part of the states. That's kind of who owned property in this area. And that's who vacations. So it was New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Those are the number one renter demographics. That's who goes there for summer vacation. Then your number one owner demographic was Northern Virginia, Richmond, DC, the DC suburbs, Maryland. And then you start getting up into the Connecticut's and, a few people in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York that own property there. But the number one demographic was Virginia. I'm from Virginia. My whole family's from there. So I made connections with these developers that were coming down to the beach and doing things. And I started learning from them. And then following them around in their areas and getting involved with deals and projects that they were doing outside of the area. So that's kind of how I learned the business. I always wanted to be a builder. I always had that in me. As a little kid, I played with, Tinker toys and
Lincoln Logs and
Rector sets, those types of things. And so I always, built buildings, and I always envisioned myself building buildings. I wanted to be an engineer. Wasn't smart enough. I'm not a great student, and I, couldn't do that kind of math. But I took some college courses after the military, thinking I was going to be an engineer, but I just, didn't work for me. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a great student in the formal environment. Very self-educated. I poured into myself, developed myself, and educated myself, and learned a lot about business and learned a lot about leadership. And that's how I've done what I've done as fast as I've done it, is by developing myself as a leader, delegator, motivator first, and then empowering others and leading and coaching and guiding others and building through them. So that's how I've done it.
So how old were you when this real estate partner kind of screwed you over? How old were you then?
Early 30s. So that would have been like 29, 30, 31 years old, somewhere around there.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your mindset and how, being at that young age, how you recovered from that So I'm sure, obviously losing great friends, plays into it, and certainly putting yourself into a position of, maybe some debt. Um, Tell me a little bit about your mindset.
Yeah. So my goal was I wanted to build cash, so my whole thing was I'm building this business, building the company, growing things, and I wanted cash so I could invest in other assets, do bigger deals. That's kind of where I was at. So our business plan was to build these houses, sell them because I needed cash. And then that all got changed on me. So, I'm a very resilient individual, very positive minded, eternally optimistic. I have a strong faith, and everything happens for a reason. And if you look for the good in every situation, no matter how bad it is, look for the lessons. You don't dwell on the mistakes and the failures. You look for the lessons and the wisdom, and you just move forward through it. So even though I lost in that situation, that experience ended up making me millions of dollars. So the experience I gained from there, and I knew it at the time, I knew, this is no fun, but I'm going to learn, and this ain't going to happen to me again. So sometimes you just kind of have to go through things. And back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have podcasts, YouTube, all that. You learned by doing. You learned the hard way. That was really the only way. And I consider that guy a mentor. Even though he took total advantage of me, I still learned from that situation. And he did mentor me, and he did teach me how to build spec houses and how to develop property and how to use banks and get bank financing and creative financing and all that. So there were a lot of good things that came out of it. So it just is what it is. At the, I don't know, at the end of the day, back then it was a couple $100,000. To me, it was very significant, and it would have made a difference in my life then. But the experience taught me even more.
Yeah, I totally get that. So you started with residential. Now, tell me how you got into, other investments.
So residential building, what I was doing was commercial in nature because they were, summer short-term rental, summer vacation homes. So they were generating big dollars, and it was all about dollars in, dollars out. So they were commercial in nature. And some of the construction I did before I moved there was in the government commercial construction world. So I was doing government contracting all up and down the East Coast, and it was all commercial. So I kind of brought that background to residential construction. So we operated our company like a commercial builder, and my mindset was from a commercial nature. So as soon as the opportunities arose, I started doing some commercial projects down there. I built a Harley Davidson dealership. I did some office buildings. I did some subdivisions where I'd buy the land, redevelop it, things like that. So, I learned from there. And then I also learned, at a young age before I went in the military in Virginia, I'd worked for some commercial developers that were building, mini storage units, one of the first mini storage developers in that area, shopping center developers. I was working for those guys, doing some subcontract work on their job sites. So I was kind of learning from them. I kind of knew what it was, but I still didn't quite get it until I started doing it. And then I read the classics, Carlton Sheets, Russ Whitney, these guys were the real estate gurus back in the day. Dave Lindahl, he's a multifamily guy. Read his book, started learning about apartments. Anthony Menudo. I mean, there was a number of different apartment people back then that had the books, right? So you'd pay $500 for the course, and you'd get the CDs or the tapes, and you'd get the little binder, with all the stuff in it. So that's how I educated myself on the space and started learning about doing multifamily, self-storage, those types of things. And then I would just go out and do projects.
What's been the most enjoyable for you?
Development. I'm opportunistic. I love a challenge. I love old buildings and making them new more than anything else. That's really fun to me. Ground up stuff is fun too, but I just love development. I love breaking ground. I love bringing stuff out of the ground. I love walking on a job site and smelling the steel, smelling the lumber, before a project starts. That's why I'm on the road every day looking at deals and projects. I mean, I'll go stand on a site. I'll pick the dirt up and I'll smell it, before I buy a piece of land or get involved with it. I mean, I want to feel the area, feel the project. So I love to build, whether it's projects, whether it's companies, whether it's people. I buy companies. I do equity capital, buy companies, build them up, sell them off. I just love building things. That's creating opportunity and challenges. I like to be challenged.
Where do you see some new opportunities coming?
It's a very interesting time right now. And, I see challenges in creating opportunity with today's cap rates and being able to create a deal, create an opportunity within the environment that we're in, because there is so much competition for multifamily assets and things like that. So you got to think a little differently, and you got to go after the stuff that people aren't interested in messing with. So everybody wants the stabilized value add stuff. where I'll go into a building that you might say, man, I ain't even walking in there. I love it. I'll go in there and I'll turn that building into something that you never really, ever could have thought it could be. And it could be anything. So there, from a real estate standpoint, there's different spaces that I like. So I still like multifamily. So if you think about the economic environment we're in, recession and economic Armageddon happened, people still need to eat. They need to get educated. They have to go to the doctor. They got to go to the dentist. They have to buy clothes. They have to put gas in their car. So, and they got to buy groceries. So if you think about the core services that people need, and you look at those asset types, those types of assets and the different classes within those assets, that's where you got to kind of be thinking when you're looking at the economy as a whole. Self-storage to me is interesting because it has survived economic downturns. I don't get it. If somebody's like bleeding, financially, and they're going to keep paying $100, $200 a month for this storage unit to store junk that they're never, ever going to do anything with. My parents were one of them. They kept storage units their whole lives. I was always like, why don't you get rid of that stuff? They're paying $100 a month. Give me the money and get rid of the, I just don't get it, but people do it. They like to store stuff. They like to hang on to it. And I'm a minimalist. If I don't need it, I get rid of it. I donate it. I put it into use for somebody else. My wife, she's always getting on me because I'm always wanting to pare down my clothes, right? I've got 3 or 4 sport coats. I always wear pretty much 1 or 2. So I'm always trying to donate the other 2. She's like, no, you need to have options. Keep them. And I'm like, I don't wear them, So anyways, that's a whole nother tangent. So in real estate, think about in the worst economic environment you can imagine, what do people need? They have to live, they have to eat, they have to put gas in their car, they have to stay healthy, and they have to educate themselves. So if you focus on those assets, you're going to be safe in any economic environment. With interest rates being low and with demand being high, I am, I don't consider development a risk. To me, it's just what I do. It's what I am. So I like the development space because there is an appetite for stabilized assets, and newer always sells better, always rents for more. So I'm totally fine with development in this environment right now, with the caveat that it is taking longer and it is costing more to get things done because material costs have gone up due to the tariffs, and labor is stressed everywhere. We don't have enough people in the trades. But with the interest rates where they are, to me, I've already been through it where if I'm paying 4.5% now, but I'm paying 20% more on construction and labor costs, well, like we said, back in 2007, 8, and 9, it was the other way around. Everything was cheaper by 20%, but I was paying 9% interest. So it's, just like cap rates on income producing properties right now, the interest rates are so cheap, you can pay a lower cap rate and still be okay.
Right. Wow. So you're, you say you're married. Do you have children?
Yeah. So I've got 3 kids, and I've been through a divorce. You'd mentioned that earlier. I was married 23 years, have 3 of my own kids, 25, 23, and 16, all girls. And then my wife now, she was married 17 years and she has 3 kids, and hers are 18, 17, and 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you still got some running around the house.
Yeah. 6 between us, but yeah. There's still a couple running around the house, and the other ones are, off in college on their own careers and, things like that.
So tell me a little bit about how you, there's so many things I want to talk to you about real estate, but I also, I know my listeners, how do you manage a full schedule like that in your career and still be a good husband and a good father and take care of yourself?
So I'm a leader, delegator, motivator. So I'm not a workaholic. So I've done a lot of things, and I have a very high capacity to do a lot of things at one time, but I do it through others. So I'm very good at finding great operators and coaching them to success. And I have no issues delegating tasks and letting go of control. So when I am the busiest, I am the most efficient, and I have the most time on my hands. So I've always been there for everything my kids have ever done, every event, every sport. I coached everything they ever did. So I was involved in all that. I didn't miss a thing, not even a classroom activity. When the kids were in elementary school and you had the little classroom things where all the parents had to show up, I was always there. And so I've always done that. Now, being a great husband and great dad, that's all relative, right? So I was there, I was present. They came first, not the business. And I've always had a good ability to balance that. But at the same token, when it's game on and it's time to be focused and do what you got to do, you got to do what you got to do. But I never did anything and sacrifice the family time. They always, did come first, and I was able to do that. So I'm just very efficient and organized. You know,
No
that's really it.
kidding. Wow. I love it. Yeah. My whole trick is, I get my health on the calendar first, and I
Hmm.
get all my family on the calendar second, and
Yeah.
build work around it. But what I haven't done as well is hired great operators.
Hmm.
But do you have a secret?
You know, I just know people. And so in businesses, if it's a business that I got involved with, it was always somebody who came to me who already was, they either had their own company and they were good at what they did, but they weren't great at running a business. So I would come alongside of them and I'd put the business back office and infrastructure. And that's kind of what I do now is I look for companies that have good, solid management, have abilities to scale, but maybe they're just not great, visionaries, so I bring the back office, I bring that scalability to it. Or it would be somebody who was working in a company. Like I had a guy that I started a pool spa landscaping company with. And he was selling me pools and spas, and we were buying 30, 40 of them a year. And he said, look, man, I can come with, we can do a business together. You can buy these things at wholesale. I'll run everything. You supply the capital and we'll have this business. And I said, okay. So I came up with the concept and everything, funded the whole 9 yards. He went and found a building, got an owner finance deal on a commercial building for 30 years. Owners financed it. So we went in there, I spent the money to get it fixed up, get it set up, and then we're off and running. So usually it was somebody who came to me that they wanted to do something, and then I would come alongside of them. Now, as far as employees go, I always look for people who were successful somewhere else that I wanted to be. So when I started building houses, I'd never built a house before. I had no clue how to build a house. So what did I do? I went to the #1 building company in my area, and I hired their top people. And I brought them in to work for me. They'd already been there 10 years before I got there, building $1 million homes. I wanted to be a $1 million home builder. So I had to get people that's what they did and they were good at it. So I always look for people that are successful somewhere else and have the experience, but are being held back. So I target those people and I say, look, come work with me. You run the company. I'll give you the tools, training, systems, and support that you need to be successful. I'll give you clear direction in no uncertain terms exactly what I expect and when. And I'll hold you accountable to that. So it's coaching. And we'll measure that performance, and I will reward you if you achieve the goals. And you're going to work harder if you don't, or you're going to get out.
So they're not equity owners then.
No,
They're none of them.
not employees. So not employees.
Not employees.
Now, the people that I did the business ventures with, yes. So we were partners. It was usually a 50-50 deal, and I would build the business up and then sell it back to them, or we'd sell it off. But the employees that worked for me in my building company, no, they're employees. So they got a salary. They did get a percentage bonus structure. So if they came in under budget and on time, they had a bonus ability, but never equity in the company.
Got it. So when you you start out with no money. When do you get to the point where now you've got enough capital to bring in quality people and help people get started?
So this is the worst advice ever. So yeah, I started with nothing from nothing. I had no backing and no financing. I had an equity line on my house of $20,000 and I had credit cards. That's how I financed my business all the way through. And then when I bought a plumbing company and wanted to build that up, I bought the company with cash, paid off all his debts. And then I went and financed a fleet of vehicles. I think back then it was 0 interest. So it was a smart move. Put them on the road, and then we went and we made it happen. So we were profitable from day one, and we used the cash flow from the business to finance growth. So that's how we did it. But initially, I used high interest credit cards because the banks would not give me loans, and I used an equity line on my house. And then as soon as I could pay that off and use cash flow from the company moving forward, that's what I did. So from that point on, my goal was create businesses that generate cash flow to invest in other assets. So that's how I did it. But you got to do what you got to do starting out.
Yeah, I get it. So when you went from owning one business, which, was your dream at the beginning,
right?
It takes a completely different type of competency to have this business that's producing revenue and profit for yourself. And then you're starting business number 2.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about, that mind shift, and how many businesses have you owned at one time?
So, a lot of them are ancillary to the construction business. So, I developed myself as a leader, motivator, delegator, and a manager as well. And there is a system to that. So it's, I came up in the restaurant industry. So I got a lot of great business training from the restaurant industry. And there was a lot of great books that I read that I learned from great leaders, like the 1 Minute Manager series. So there's a series of books called the 1 Minute Manager that is my management philosophy that I use then and I use now. I also read Harold Janine, who was the CEO of ITT. He's got a book called Managing, one of the greatest books ever on managing conglomerates, which is a collection of businesses. So I learned from that and from him as a mentor how to manage a number of companies at one time through other leaders. And then also read Andrew Grove, High Output Management. And then there were all the other things like Guerrilla Marketing and Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Power of Positive Thinking, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So, again, you didn't catch me in front of the TV. You didn't catch me, if I was out exercising, I didn't have music playing in my ears. It was a book, So, I am a cultivation of hundreds, maybe even thousands of books, programs, seminars. I've spent probably $300,000-$400,000 educating myself through books, seminars, courses over the years. I would consume, and I still do every day. I'm constantly pumping into myself, and developing myself and developing my skills, because that's my job as a leader. Our job as leaders is to be the best we can be for those around us. So, answering your question, it was my construction company first. Then along the way, I did the plumbing company at the same time. I had our storm shutter company, hurricane shutter company at the same time. I had pool spas and landscaping at the same time. I had a gymnastics, trampoline, cheerleading school. That was a community-based thing, but I didn't do it for the money. Had that going. Had a restaurant or two at the time. That going. So that was 6, and I had a real estate brokerage. So I did have a real estate brokerage that was part of my construction company. I did construction first. Then after I paid my realtor $300,000 one year, I went and got my license. And my first commission right out of the gate was $30,000. That was the kind of market I was in. You would have thought the light bulb would have went off there, right? And then just boom, do that. But so I had, 6 or 8 real estate agents in North Carolina. They're all brokers working for me at any time during that point. So we had a real estate construction development company. We had a real estate brokerage. We had restaurants, had those other businesses. So probably at any given time, I always had about 4 to 7 businesses going at once. But the real estate construction development was always my main core business that funded everything else. And again, I had those going, but I wasn't doing them day to day. I had Dan there. I came in and I was your capital partner, and I was your intellectual capital, and I was your back office. So I would take you and blow up your mortgage business, and I would help you hire people, build a team, and I would put the accounting support in place through, like most of the small business operators didn't have an office manager. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that you do, if you want to grow your mortgage business, you want to grow your real estate business, you need an admin / so you need an office manager / bookkeeper / admin / marketing assistant / transaction coordinator / pick up my dry cleaning / whatever. So that one person that does everything for you initially takes all of that administrative load off of you. So that's the first thing I put in place, but mainly it's the books to keep that individual organized and straight so they can go do what they're good at, which is managing crews in the field, or which is, teaching a team how to originate loans and how to generate business. Or for realtors, teaching your people how to get a listing, how to deal with a buyer, and then handling the overall organization of the business. So that's what I would do with people, is I would put those support systems in place, and then I would coach them on how to build a team around them and how to lead that team and teach them how to inspire results through others. That's what leaders do.
I love it. So how many businesses do you have right now that you're operating, or that you own, not really operating? Yeah.
So right now, I have 3 that I'm doing right now. I've got a real estate and development company. I've got my coaching business, online education business. I'm creating some courses there. People have been asking me for courses on real estate development, on sales, and on these other things.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in the online education space because there's a lot of junk out there. So I have a podcast and a YouTube channel, and my content is short, direct, and to the point. I don't sell, I don't pitch. It's just straight up, here's the rubber meets the road. This is how you do it. And I give it all away. So I'm developing that, platform as well. And then I have, some real estate investments that I'm doing. At any given time, I might have, 8 or 10 properties doing different things.
Wow. Okay. So before we leave, any tips, any hot tips, markets, things that we should be looking for?
So on the real estate side, core services, if you're doing general residential real estate, right now we're in a bubble. The market's about as hot as it's going to get, and it's going to go nowhere but down from here. So watch the interest rates. If the interest rates stay low, we're going to stay robust. If interest rates start to tick up, as we saw last year, it's going to affect the market real quick like it did last year. But I think right now the Fed, everybody knows interest rates need to remain low. So get out there, get it, double down, triple down, quadruple down on everything you're doing that's working right now, because it is time to make hay. The sun is shining. Get it, store it up, and be ready for the downturn because it's coming. And, so on the residential real estate side, what's really, and I'll tell you another opportunity for your residential agents out there is investors. So there's a lot of wholesalers out there that are, assigning contracts, getting, motivated sellers under contract and then selling that contract to an investor. A lot of states are requiring licensing now to be in that space. So real estate agents, all a wholesaler does is market. They spend a lot of money marketing direct to motivated sellers. Every real estate agent should be marketing motivated sellers and capturing that market and being ready for that shift, because there's going to be a lot of wholesalers that aren't going to get their license. There's going to be a huge opportunity to take over that space. And that's also repeat transactions, working with investors, cash buyers, flippers that are looking for property. Real estate agents should have an arm that markets motivated sellers and goes after those motivated sellers like wholesalers do to feed that investment side. Man, that's just residual income right there. That's like an annuity.
So if you've got cash, and we're in a bubble, would your recommendation be to stand on the sideline for a bit until we see a little bit of a correction and then go out and buy?
So I'm opportunistic. Yeah, I'm very careful. So what I'm not doing right now, and what I've always done, is I always want to come in a little bit below market. So if I'm flipping a house, I want to be able to buy that house, fix it up, and sell it for about 5 to 10% below what the market is averaging right now, what the max value is, so that I'm competitive. So if you chase the market down and you stay that way versus I'm going to buy this, do this, and I'm going to push the market, you don't want to be there right now. This is not the time to be pushing. And I'll tell you, on your statement in our conversation earlier about the stocks and all that, the most important thing to know, so everybody says you make your money when you buy low, sell high. That's great. But if you don't sell at the right time, you ain't making any money. It's more important to know the top than it is the bottom. It's more valuable to get out at the top than it is to buy in at the bottom.
Don't get greedy.
Don't get greedy. So, make your money, take it off the table, move on to the next deal. So I'd be cautiously optimistic. I'd be very careful. Whatever you're contemplating investing in, make sure that you've got plenty of room so that you can adjust. And so if the market does turn and we lose 25 to 50% values, which could happen, only if the interest rates really go out of whack, right? So we're not in a lending environment like we were before that's going to really, tank the banking system. But we are in an environment where stocks are way overinflated. The market is going to sell off. We're going to lose probably half the value that you're seeing right now. The question is, when do you pull out and sit on the sidelines? And I would say right now is a great time. And whoever has investment advisors, I'd be talking to them, listening to them. There's no harm in being in cash right now. I mean, we're not facing hyperinflation. Your dollar is not going to lose value significantly in the next year.
I agree.
So there's no harm in pulling back right now and kind of waiting. And when the market does deflate, then maybe it's time to get back in and ride that thing back up. But I wouldn't sit there and stay in for the long haul, because we are due for a big sell-off. I would watch our debt to GDP. The real problem that nobody understands what the implications are is when we reach a point to where our interest on our debt outpaces the GDP, meaning we're paying more in interest than the country is producing in income. What is the real result of that? What is the real impact of that? Nobody seems to know that answer, including the Fed. So that's a big thing to watch, because when that happens, that's when you're going to see,
Wait, so you're watching. So what's the trigger? What are you watching there?
Debt, the national debt to
right.
GDP.
To GDP.
So
Okay.
Right. So we are borrowing money from other countries to operate.
Yeah.
And we are the safe haven. Our currency is the gold standard for the world. We are still the safe haven. But at some point, if we get to the point to where we're borrowing so that we can pay our debt, and we're not producing enough income through tax revenue, right, to pay the debt, we got a problem. So how do you sustain that? And printing money, that's when we can have a problem. Now, I don't have a big enough brain to figure out what the consequences of that are, but that's what the smart money and the smart people are looking at, is that balance right there. Mm-hmm. When our debt becomes unsustainable and we have to start printing money to service the debt, that's when we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I get it. Greg, I really appreciate your time. How can people get in touch with you?
So yeah, my website's gregdickerson.com. All my info is on there, my podcast, YouTube channel, and everything that I do, it's gregdickerson.com. And, feel free to shoot me an email, reach out anytime. I'm always happy to help out any way I can. And I'd love to do this again. Maybe we can speak a little bit more about the mortgage business and real estate.
Yeah,
Business. We
absolutely.
didn't really get into that a whole lot, but yeah, I enjoyed it.
Greg, I'll definitely be in touch. I really enjoyed this 45 minutes and look forward to learning some more from you and
Yeah.
giving you what you need as well. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
You too. Bye-bye.